Hello, my sexy listeners. I'm ThatPodcastGirl C Dub, you know me, and this is a podcast about house music. Let's get into today's episode. The booth is quieter now, not in volume. The system is still loud. The room is still moving, but inside the booth, something has settled. A pair of CDJs, a mixer, sometimes a laptop, a USB drive no larger than a keychain holding thousands of tracks. The weight that used to sit behind the DJ, the crates stacked against the wall, the physical archive of a person's taste, is gone. We talked about how that happened in our last 2 episodes. Tonight, we talk about what the rooms did in response. Because when the constraint leaves the booth, the room has to answer, and different rooms answered very differently. Somewhere in the mid-2000s, a DJ named Richie Hawtin started doing something that made club owners genuinely uncomfortable. He would arrive before the club opened and ask for a sound check. Not a line check, a full sound check. He needed time to plug everything in. At the time, this was unheard of. DJs showed up, played records, and left. Hawtin showed up with a laptop, a mixer, controllers, and a vision of what a DJ set could be when the system held the tempo steady and the DJ used that stability as a launchpad rather than a destination. Hawtin had built his early reputation in the Detroit techno world, coming up through the Windsor, Ontario underground in the late 1980s and crossing the river into Detroit's scene. By the 2000s, he was performing what he called decks, EFX, and 909 shows, sets built around looping and layering in real time, treating Tractor as a live instrument rather than a playback device. He and his partner, John Acquaviva, saw so much promise in digital DJing that they famously invested in Tractor's development and wound down their own record pressing operation to go fully digital. The club owners who argued with him about sound checks in 2001 were watching the future arrive and not recognizing it yet. His 2005 album DE9, Transitions, took that philosophy into the studio, breaking down hundreds of tracks and rebuilding them into new ones inside Ableton. It was documentation of a shift that was already happening live in booths every weekend. What Hawtin represented was one answer to the question the digital era had opened up. When the system holds its tempo for you, when drift is eliminated and cue points are stored and loops are quantized, what do you do with all that freed attention? His answer was to intervene more, reshape more aggressively, move through ideas faster without losing control of the underlying rhythm. The stability of the system became permission to push harder against its edges. But there were other answers too, and the rooms where those answers lived tell you as much about the music as the technology does. Fabric opened in London in October 1999, built inside the renovated Victorian underground space of the Metropolitan Cold Stores on Charterhouse Street in Farringdon. It took 3 years of structural work to get it ready. The founders, Keith Riley and Cameron Leslie, had both been part of a warehouse party culture and wanted something that went against the grain of the superclub era that was dominating London nightlife at the time. No spectacle, no celebrity DJs as the selling point. Sound first. Room 1 had something almost no club in Europe had at the time. A body sonic dance floor, 450 bass transducers embedded under the floor, emitting bass frequencies directly into the bodies standing on it. You didn't just hear the music at Fabric, you felt it through the soles of your shoes, up through your legs and into your chest. Before the CDJ 1000 was even released, Fabric had already built a room where the physical relationship between body and sound was the entire point. 3 rooms running simultaneously with independent sound systems meant the experience was modular. You chose your path through the building. you could move between rooms and encounter different sounds and different crowds without leaving the same venue. That architecture reflected something digital technology was making possible in booths at exactly the same moment. The night no longer had to be a single arc. It could be a series of rooms you move through at your own pace. Fabric's resident DJs, Craig Richards and Terry Francis, had been there since opening night and built their reputations through consistency and care rather than celebrity. The club went on to win DJ Magazine's World #1 Club Award in 2007 and 2008. But the real influence was quieter than that. Fabric showed that a room built around listening, around physical immersion in sound, could compete with anything the Superclub era had produced and outlast most of it. Then there was Berghain. Berghain opened in Berlin in October 2004 in a former combined heat and power plant built in 1953 as part of East Germany's post-war reconstruction and abandoned in the 1980s. The main room had 18-meter concrete ceilings. The Function 1 sound system installed in 2005 was one of the largest club installs the company had ever done. The founders were Michael Teufele and Norbert Thormann, who had run the legendary Ostgut Club from 1998 until it was demolished in 2003 to make way for an arena. They did not give interviews, they did not explain themselves, they let the building speak. What Berghain answered was, with time. DJs were given 6 hours, 8 hours, sometimes more. Resident DJ Len Faki described what that duration did to his sets. He said because of the long duration, his sets changed a lot. The relationship with the crowd reached another level. Elsewhere, you'd be a peak time DJ. In Berghain, you were just beginning. The room demanded a completely different understanding of pacing, one where the first 2 hours might feel like preparation for something that hadn't arrived yet. The tools inside the Berghain booth were not dramatically different from what you'd find anywhere else in 2004. CDJs, a mixer, eventually digital systems. What was different was the expectation. The crowd came prepared to stay. The DJ was expected to honor that commitment with patience and depth rather than constant movement. The discipline required was not mechanical, it was emotional. It asked the person in the booth to decide how much intervention was necessary when almost anything was possible. In 2016, a German court officially designated Berghain a cultural institution, granting it the same reduced tax status as opera houses and concert halls. The building that used to generate electricity for East Berlin was now legally recognized as a site of culture. The architecture had become the argument. New York processed all of this a little differently. Cielo opened in the Meatpacking District in 2003, designed from the ground up around acoustic precision. It was one of my favorite clubs to go to when I was in college back in the day. The room was smaller than Fabric, smaller than Berghain, intentionally so. The sound system was tuned for separation. You could hear individual elements of a track with a clarity that changed how you moved. DJs didn't need to compensate for a weak system or fight the room. The system carried the sound exactly as delivered. What that precision asked of the DJ was selection and timing. In a room where everything is audible, where the crowd can hear every detail of a transition, there is nowhere to hide a mistake and no way to blur the edges of a bad choice. The long-form discipline that had developed in vinyl-era rooms, the patience that Danny Tenaglia had built into marathon sets at Twilo before Cielo existed, translated directly into this new environment. Except now, the pacing was a decision rather than a physical necessity. You could hear longer blends at Cielo. You could hear the restraint. DJs letting a record sit long enough for the body to register it fully before moving. The digital tools made it easy to do the opposite. The room asked them not to. Then Output opened in Brooklyn in 2013 and took that logic one step further. By then, USB drives had replaced crates entirely. The entire archive of house music fit in something you could lose in a coat pocket. Output responded to that abundance by removing everything that competed with the music. No photo policy, no visual distraction, screens pointed away from the crowd. The DJ was centered, not as a spectacle, but as a source. The system was tuned for impact and for consistency, and the room was designed so that sustained attention was the only real option. DJs like James Zabiela, who had been pushing digital tools outward since the mid-2000s, using effects and real-time looping to expand what a set could sound like, found rooms like Output to be a precise test of that approach. The question was not whether the tools could do it. They could do almost anything at that point. The question was whether the person using them knew when to stop. Across all of these rooms, the technology was largely the same. CDJs, digital vinyl systems, laptops, mixers with effects. The difference was always what the room asked of the person holding it. Fabric asked for immersion and modular flow. Berghain asked for duration and patience. Cielo asked for precision and restraint. Output asked for your focus and intention. The system can match the beat. It can hold the tempo steady for an entire night without drifting. It can carry thousands of tracks without weight. What it cannot do is decide how the night should feel. That responsibility did not go away when the crates did. It became more visible because when the constraint is removed and anything is possible, the choices a DJ makes are the only thing left to read. That is what these rooms were built to reveal. So let's get into it. If you were playing during this shift in any of these cities, in any room where you felt the technology change what was possible, I want to hear from you. Tell me the city, tell me what your name is, tell me the year. Email me at thatpodcastgirlcdub@gmail.com. I'm ThatPodcastGirl C Dub, and this is a podcast about house music. Until next time, keep the beats alive.